Hello, everybody, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're watching us. This is Pastor Joe here at St. Jacobus Lutheran Church in Woodside, and we continue our read up to the Ascension. Today we're going to look at Luke chapter 6, verses 1 to 16, which will bring us right up to the start of the Sermon on the Mount. So we're going to read, and then I'm going to focus on a few different aspects and words in the reading today. So this is day 11, and we have Luke chapter 6, verses 1 to 16. One Sabbath, while Jesus was going through the grain fields, his disciples plucked some heads of grain, rubbed them in their hands, and ate them. But some of the Pharisees said, "Why are you doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" Jesus answered, "Have you not read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God and took and ate the bread of the presence, which it is not lawful for any but the priests to eat. And he gave some to his companions. Then Jesus said to them, 'The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath.'" On another Sabbath, Jesus entered the synagogue and taught, and there was a man there whose right hand was withered. The scribes and the Pharisees watched Jesus to see whether he would cure on the Sabbath, so that they might find an accusation against him. Even though Jesus knew what they were thinking, he said to the man who had the withered hand, "Come and stand here." The man got up and stood there. Then Jesus said to them, "I ask you, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to destroy it?" After looking around at all of them, Jesus said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He did so, and his hand was restored. But they were filled with fury and discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus. Now during those days, Jesus went out to the mountain to pray, and he spent the night in prayer to God. And when day came, Jesus called his disciples and chose 12 of them, whom he also named apostles: Simon, whom he named Peter, and his brother Andrew, and James, and John, and Philip, and Bartholomew, and Matthew, and Thomas, and James, son of Alphaeus, and Simon, who was called the Zealot, and Judas, son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became the traitor. The word of the Lord. So this reading is the start of Jesus' conflicts with the religious authorities and the setting aside of these 12 people to be apostles. Now, Jesus prays, pauses, goes away for the entire night to pray and make this important decision. The actual word apostle in Greek is apostolion, and it means one who is sent. These 12 are going to be missionaries, messengers, people who are going to go and be entrusted with sharing the teaching and message and love and welcome and power of God with all different cities and communities and people around the world. So Jesus sets them apart for this work, and like we saw yesterday, Jesus runs this kind of apprenticeship where they will learn how to do this. They will be fed and taught and instructed and given all the equipment they need through this kind of apprenticeship, through following Jesus, through watching what he does, to watching how he responds and reacts to people in need or people in authority, or what he stops to do, and all these different things. So they witness the power that they're going to be entrusted with, as well as the boldness and the strength that they will need to do this work. Now, we see at the very start, Jesus and his disciples get in trouble for picking some grain on the Sabbath. Now, the religious authorities are referring to a specific reference in Exodus. So this is Exodus chapter 34, verse 21. 6 days you shall labor, but on the seventh day you shall rest. Even during plowing season and harvest season, you must rest. So for the religious authorities, that means no harvesting on the Sabbath. not even this tiny bit of grain that they pick and rub together to make edible and eat. Jesus responds by telling them the Sabbath is this gift day. It's a day to show, experience, witness, reflect on the power of God, on God's saving work through history, all the way back to the Exodus and freedom from slavery in Egypt and the Promised Land and the call of all of these people and the work of the prophets and all of the different things that God has done, the giving of the law to guide and direct and restore and create community, and all these different things you were called to reflect on during the Sabbath. Now, Jesus here says something very interesting. He says, the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. Now, this is an interesting phrase, really. Jesus uses the phrase, the Son of Man, occurs over 80 times in the New Testament, in the Gospels and in Acts and in other places. Now, for a word that is used so much, Jesus actually refers to himself as the Son of Man, almost as much as the Son of God. And it happens in all different contexts. Now, one of the complicated things for such a common phrase that Jesus uses is for hundreds of years now, nobody is really sure what this phrase means. There's a lot of ideas that connect it to the Old Testament ideas of the Son of Man being human, or connecting to the Son of Man in the book of Daniel. There's a reference to the Savior, this figure, this leader who's going to come, and they're referred to as Son of Man as well. And there's references in the Psalms and some other places. But Jesus' use of this term is unique because Jesus says the Son of Man. We don't think of an article like the being that important, but it makes it one figure, and it makes it not refer to humanity in general, not refer to a particular role or thing. It refers to Jesus himself. Now, this can be seen, Jesus uses the word in three different sort of situations. One is when he talks about the suffering, of his betrayal, trial, accusations, conviction, torture, death, and resurrection. When Jesus talks about this whole series of events, he talks about the Son of Man will undergo suffering. And this is to prepare the disciples and the apostles for what is to come, to get them ready for what they're going to endure, because Jesus is not on this path to military power and worldly glory and the thrones of the world or anything like that. So Jesus is always very clear to show where his ministry is going, what the ultimate end is going to be. It's going to be the defeat, not of Rome, not of Herod. It's going to be the defeat of sin and death. Now, the other times Jesus uses this is to refer to what he's doing here and now, talking about the work that's being done to heal, to cure, to restore, to correct false teachings, to confront people who've sucked the joy and life and love out of the faith, to confront people who are abusing their authority to make profit or gain or fame or whatever else they're up to. So when Jesus is out healing and curing and caring for people and welcoming and doing all this work, he often says the Son of Man is acting in the world. And then finally, just the Son of Man is used as sort of an exaltation of entering the world, of God's presence, God's entry into the place and time. So there is, again, a lot of confusion over what this term means. People look at it in contrast to Son of God, where Jesus is expressing this two sides of one being God's presence with us, the Word made flesh, and the other reminding us that God is become truly human, one of us, a person connected to humanity, a person who's in the world, experiencing, being tempted, being hungry, being thirsty, being bored, being sad, being happy, being all these different things, and most of all, being faithful to God's promises and God's work. People have looked at how those two interact together. People have looked at this as a term for the Messiah, where the suggestion would be that if Jesus started with this claim that he's the Messiah, the expected one, his ministry would go very differently. He would be confronted by the authorities much quicker. His fame and the expectations surrounding him would be way more rapid, and he would not have the time to get to all those places, all the cities, and all the other people that needed to be seen and taught and talked to, and shown that God is with them as well. So this is a sort of a very short introduction to this phrase, Son of Man, as people continue to debate and look at and try to figure out what exactly this means. And for me, it's always meant a promise that God is present in the world. It's a way to express that God is here with us, that these are the things we could see God doing. And when we talk about Christmas and the Word made flesh and God being born into the world and all these different things, this phrase, the Son of Man, helps to capture that, reminding us that God is with us. Today, now, in New York and around the world, we often talk about that in terms of suffering, that God is with us as we endure this COVID-19 outbreak and all of the economic and social fallout connected to it, as we worry about loved ones, as we worry about ourselves and all these different things. We are often reminded to look that God is still with us. God is offering comfort to the mourning and power and strength to the caregivers and healthcare workers, and God is inviting us to remember that and let that work shape what we're doing. So tomorrow we continue with the rest of Luke chapter 6, where we will hear the Sermon on the Mount. Luke's version is considerably shorter than the version in Matthew, and it's one of the, I guess, mostly the only sermon, really, that we hear from Jesus, where we get a sense of what sitting out in this field, in this natural acoustic theater by the sea, what that was like, and how it challenged and helped shape and care for the people, and how it spoke truth in ways that people could understand, in ways that were very real and connected to their lives and their work and agriculture and fishing and all these different things. So tune in tomorrow as we look at the Sermon on the Mount. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.